County announced that it has its first confirmed case of swine flu. The patient, whose name and hometown were not released, does have a connection to St. Francis Prep in Queens, where most of the 44 confirmed local cases are centered. And joining us now with more on the swine flu and how to avoid it is Dr. Christina Zarcadoolas. You told me I was going to mess that up, and I did.
You know, we can predict some things.
I'm sorry. Well, you have a thesis. Your thesis is health message forensics. What do you mean by that?
That's essentially taking a look at, usually both in real time and then retrospectively after an event, how was the message created? How clear was it? How likely was it that the public can actually understand it and act on it?
Well, you see what happens.
Right.
It's either feast or famine with these messages. I mean, when something like this begins to break out, suddenly it's everywhere. Mm-hmm. We blanket the newspapers, we blanket the television. Mm-hmm. You can't go on a website without finding out something about this. Mm-hmm. Is there a better way to handle this with the public to get information out, or is this just a good teaching moment?
Well, it's a great teaching moment if it's seized on, and I think the media has been doing a great job. Public health officials have been doing an enormous job, both on the city, the state, and the federal level. I think it's a question of what should the public be attending to in all of these messages? How do they decide what's the trusted, source of information? And that's very difficult, as you said, when so much information is coming at you and the information is changing literally hour to hour. And that concept of the changing information and the changing scientific recommendation is something that we know historically has worried publics and caused a lot of consternation and anxiety.
So what should the public know about this outbreak?
Well, obviously, the messages about basic hygiene have been strong, have been consistent, and from everything that I can tell in my interviews of the public, they get that. There are some concepts, however, about pandemic that are so well known by scientists and epidemiologists, and this gulf between what they understand about the science and what we do is large. And right now, these are the troublesome things. The concept that, people want to know, why don't scientists know? Is this a real pandemic? Why don't they know, should I be taking Tamiflu now prophylactically? And the appreciation that the science of this is always changing is something that's not shared by the public. So when the Homeland Security Napolitano said today, we're in this is going to be a marathon, what she knows and what her experts know is that this is going to be changing on a very, very, very routine basis, and they expect that to happen, and the public is just looking for an answer.
I think they may need a little more leadership, too. I mean, when you look at this, there's a pattern that sets in as well. When you look back at the anthrax scare that we had here, there were few cases where anthrax showed up. There was a run on Cipro. You could not get Cipro. There was none available, and it was dangerous because there might have been people who actually needed it who couldn't get it. The same sort of thing is happening this time around with the Tamiflu, where people are getting it prophylactically, they're getting it in advance, fearful, and you don't really need it unless you develop the symptoms, correct?
Or you've been exposed, from what I understand. This is not my actual field, but yeah, and there are mixed messages right now. So you have some government officials saying don't run out and get Tamiflu, and then you have a CDC recommendation that's a little more problematic, and that's saying, with exposure you might, should be taking Tamiflu. This is the type of ambiguity that the public is left to then really wonder who they should be trusting. And it takes a bunch of science knowledge to make informed decisions about what you're really going to worry about here and just have a concern about versus what you're going to panic about.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. Sorry about the name. I'll work on that.
Don't.
Inexpensive face masks have become a symbol of the swine flu outbreak, and those who can afford them are turning to a new drug, Tamiflu, as well, as we mentioned a moment ago. Roseanne Coletti has a